body horror. Not dead bodies, your own body. And something is going very wrong. Inside, your body is betraying you, and since it's your own body, you can't even run away. Many people believe that body horror began in film. The first one I remember was David Cronenberg's Shivers, or They Came From Within, as it was called in its US release. It was 1975, and my wife Carolyn and I were watching it as part of a double bill at a drive-in. I can't remember what the second film was. I didn't make it that far. What I do remember was the sight of fist-sized parasites moving under people's skins and shooting out their mouths into the next victim. Yuck. I started getting woozy. The best body horror makes your own body turn against you. Without thinking, I hit the accelerator of our car and tore the drive-in speaker right out of our side window as we careened crazily up and down the roads to make our escape. And that is an excerpt from the introduction written by Stuart Gordon to the book I'll be reviewing today, The Mammoth Book of Body Horror, edited by Paul Kane and Marie Regan. Hello out there, fellow horror and thriller and suspense fans. This is DeathGroundReviews, and yes, the book today is The Mammoth Book of Body Horror. And there are a lot of great authors compiled in this book. You've got Stephen King, you've got Neil Gaiman, you've got Clive Barker, Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley. It's stacked with a lot of classics, a lot of big names. And I guess the first thing I'd like to say about it is, if you are a seasoned horror fan, this book may not be for you. You might pick it up and start reading it and then sigh and toss it to the corner and say, been there and done that. You know what I mean? A lot of these stories you've probably read already. You've read The Telltale Heart. You've read H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator. You've read George Langland's The Fly. I might have pronounced his name wrong there, but you've been there. You've done that. But, maybe you want to revisit some of those stories too. But I think this is a great collection to introduce somebody to the horror genre. Because they get a lot of great stories to sink their teeth in, to really cut their teeth in the genre. I think it's great for that. So I wanted to make that clear right from the beginning. But I really enjoyed it because I've realized, I've been a horror fan for quite some time. I'm one of those that kind of revisits certain stories over and over again. I rewatch certain horror movies over and over again. I've spent a lot of time reading Stephen King over the years instead of branching out to other things. And so this was a good experience for me personally because I needed to experience other authors out there of the genre. And a couple favorites from this book that came to mind, one of them that really gripped me, was Region of the Flesh by Richard Christian Matheson. It's a very short story. It's only about 3 or 4 pages long, but it's about this man who purchases a mattress, and the previous owner had been murdered on this mattress by his wife. It's described that she went into a trance and chained him down onto the mattress and started cutting his limbs off. Just brutal and horrifying. But this new owner, he becomes obsessed with this mattress and the history behind it. And he'll lay on it and just daydream about this murder that took place. And he just keeps spiraling deeper and deeper into this obsession to the point that at one point in the story, he literally is cutting into the mattress just to find leftover blood stains that he can rub his nose in. He so badly wants to relive that experience and understand it. And I mean, the story made me wince. I mean, it shocked the hell out of me, but at the same time, I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was beautifully written in certain points, too. The other story, another story that really grabbed me, was Dog Days by Graham Masterson. And I've heard the name Graham Masterson before. I guess he's written like 100 novels. I think he's a British novelist. I know in the back of the book here it kind of tells you, let me check. Somewhere back here in the notes, it tells you about the authors. But yeah, I think he was a British novelist. Sorry. His horror debut was in 1975. The Manitou. So he created the novel The Manitou. It's the story of a 300-year-old Native American shaman who is reborn in the present day to take his revenge on the white man. It was a huge bestseller. It was made into a classic movie starring Tony Curtis. Since then, Graham has written over 100 novels, horror, thrillers, short stories, historical romances, etc., etc. He does live in London, or he did. Or he befriended an author, William Burroughs, who lives in London. I don't know, it doesn't really say where he's from, but that's neither here nor there, right? But yes, I do remember The Manitou. I remember seeing the movie when I was a kid, and there's a scene where the Manitou is bursting forth from one of the character's skin. It's like ripping out of his body, and I remember just having to turn away from that. I was so horrified by it. But anyway, Dog Days, yes. I really liked this story by Graham Masterson. I was very surprised by it. So the story is, it's about a guy whose girlfriend leaves him for his more handsome best friend. And he just becomes sorrowful and overwhelmed with jealousy, and that jealousy just keeps building up until one day it erupts. And one day he comes across his friend in traffic. He's in his car behind his friend's Jeep. And his ex-girlfriend is in the Jeep with his best friend. And out of anger, he starts ramming his car into the back of the Jeep. And the friend gets out to confront him, and he rams the Jeep again, and he ends up pushing it into oncoming traffic, and a semi crushes the Jeep and nearly kills his ex-girlfriend, crushes her pelvis and her body. And but the twist in the end of that story was just, it was mind-boggling in a good way. It made me laugh and shocked me. The other thing I really loved about Masterson's story was the narrative voice was just perfect to the character as a first-person narrative, and he maintains the tone throughout the whole story just very well, and the dialogue was just very smooth and natural between the characters. It worked great. I definitely want to check out more of Graham Masterson's stories in the future. I was very surprised by this author. See, it's always good when you branch out of what your comfort zone is, right? Some other well-known stories from the collection. Yes, there was a Stephen King. He pretty much makes about every horror anthology, doesn't he? What was included in here by him was the Survivor Type, which is a story about a guy who gets washed up on a beach. And he was a pharmacist before this, and he got caught up in drug dealing, heroin dealing, and he's picked up a supply, I think, from China or something like that, and he's on a cruise ship bringing it back to the U.S., and the cruise ship sinks, and he gets washed up on a beach, and all he's got is a journal and tons of heroin. And he's trying to survive, and he's making all these journal entries about his experience, and he resorts to cannibalizing himself, pretty much. And, just a very gruesome story that makes you laugh at the same time, you know. There's just some gruesome humor in it as well. King mixes it very well in that story. I liked it quite a bit. I've read that one before. The first time I read that story was in the Skeleton Crew collection. That was actually the first Stephen King book I've ever read, was Skeleton Crew. But, so you got Survivor Type. In fact, there's a couple classic ones that I actually did individual reviews of in earlier videos. You had Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, and you had the... no, I didn't review The Fly. I had considered reviewing The Fly. But yeah, Who Goes There was in the collection. And that's a great story. But you got Clive Barker, The Body Politic, which was a good one. Oh yes, Robert Bloch wrote a very interesting story called The Chaney Legacy. It's about a guy that buys a home that Lon Chaney, the actor, the silent movie actor, owned, and he finds this little makeup mirror that allows him to sort of embody all of the characters that Lon Chaney played, and they start to gradually possess him. Very, very fascinating story. Another highlight from the collection, if I can find it, the author's first, Barbie Wilde. So she wrote a story called Polyp, and it's about a guy who's getting a checkup up his anus and his colon to remove polyps that are growing in there. And one of those polyps is a living monster, and it literally shoots out of his anus and just starts ripping through people throughout the hospital, just killing everybody. And he ends up cornering his polyp in the restroom, in one of the bathroom stalls. And it's a lot of humor and just shocking stuff, gruesome, shocking stuff going on in it, you know what I mean? There was Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Telltale Heart. It was included in this collection, and I kind of found that one out of place. I know that, you have the old man's obsessed, he's fixated on the narrator is fixated on the vulture eye of the old man, and that's kind of what drives him to murder the old man. And so I guess that's technically a monstrous body part, I guess you could say, but it seemed kind of weak to me. It felt more like a gothic horror story than a body horror story, and so I felt like they maybe could have removed the Telltale Heart and included some other story. Another downside for me, there was a Richard Matheson story called 'Tis the Season to be Jelly. Most of it was just dialogue, and it was very folksy, kind of hillbilly dialogue, and it was hard to slog through. It was a really short story of like 2 pages, but I couldn't get into it. Normally I really love Richard Matheson, but that story I found I had a hard time reading it. But Richard Christian Matheson, the one I talked about earlier, he was included here, and that's Richard Matheson's son, I just realized too, which is a cool addition. But anyway, yeah, a lot of great stuff in this collection. If you're a seasoned horror writer or reader, you may really like this collection still. You may want to revisit some of the classics. Maybe there are some you haven't read before. But if you're somebody that hasn't read a lot of horror, I highly recommend it. I think you'll get a kick out of it. And it's a great way to cut your teeth on some of the great works out there and the great authors. So anyway, guys, yeah, that's my review of the Mammoth Book of Body Horror, edited by Paul Kane and Maria Regan. And let me know what you guys think. If you're planning on reading it, let me know what you think of some of the authors included in the collection. And I'll see you later. This is DeathGroundReviews, the monster that devours horror, suspense, and all those things of the fantastic. See ya.